"Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle." That's exactly what the deputy barked at Karina, the head of the HOA, as she stood glaring at my old Ford truck like it was a national security threat. Her phone was still clutched in her hand. She had just called 911 on me for parking on my own ranch. "I've told you people again and again," she screeched, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is a private community. He's trespassing." The deputy glanced her way, then turned back toward me. "Sir, can I get your name?" I didn't even get the chance to answer. Another cruiser pulled in behind the first. The door swung open, and out stepped someone Karen never imagined she'd see. "Dad?" the sheriff said, raising an eyebrow as he looked at me. Karen's face turned crimson. She looked like she might faint. And that a broken bar. That's when the real fireworks began. Let me rewind a bit and explain how things got to this point. My name's Paul. I'm a 62-year-old retired electrician who's spent his entire life in the same quiet corner of Montana. I built this ranch with my bare hands, and I raised my son Ethan right here. He's now the county sheriff, fair, strong, and raised with good sense. I've never been one to go looking for conflict, but some folks, they drag trouble around with them like it's a purse. Let me introduce you to Karen. She moved in a couple of years back out of state, probably from California. Rolled in with her luxury car, oversized sunglasses, and an attitude that screamed, "I'm in charge." Once she was elected president of the newly formed HOA, things took a nosedive, especially for anyone living close to my property. She took issue with my old wooden fence, claimed it clashed with her idea of community standards. She whined about my roosters crowing at dawn, even said the scent of fresh hay offended her. But what really pushed things over the edge was her opinion on my pickup truck. She claimed it made the neighborhood look poor. Now keep in mind, my ranch isn't even inside their neighborhood. It's a couple hundred yards from the gate. But Karen? If she could see it, she figured she had authority over it. And then last Friday, she crossed the line. That morning, I was out near the red barn, watering the bushes. Horses neighed in the stables, birds chirped. It was the kind of peaceful moment that reminds you why you live where you do. That is, until I spotted a little white hoe-issued golf cart tearing down my gravel drive. It was Karen. She didn't stop at the gate, even though she had no permission to enter. Instead, she parked right in front of my truck like she owned the place. "Paul," she snapped, hopping out like she was law enforcement, "this truck has been sitting here all week. You're in violation of community parking regulations." I just blinked. "Karen, this is my land. That's my truck. You can't issue a ticket to someone for parking on their own property." She pulled out a clipboard like she was a traffic cop. "This is a shared access area. HOA rules apply to all visible lots." I chuckled. "Karen, I've owned this land since 1987. Your HOA has no authority here. I'm not even a member." She didn't care. She began snapping photos of the truck, the barn, even my dogs. That's when I calmly told her she needed to leave. "Oh yeah, or what?" She smirked. Then she did the unthinkable. She dialed 911, right there, on my land, arms crossed. She reported me as a hostile trespasser with an abandoned vehicle on HOA property. I just stood there, baffled by how someone could be so confidently wrong and loud at the same time. Moments later, a sheriff's cruiser arrived. Karen straightened her sunglasses like she was preparing to accept a civic award. She was mid-sentence, telling the deputy she feared for her safety, when he approached me. "Sir, I need to ask you a few questions." Karen looked like she was buzzing with anticipation. Then, another cruiser rolled in. This one clearly marked Sheriff. The door opened, and out stepped Sheriff Ethan Monroe. "My son." He looked at me, then at Karen. Broken bar, what's going on here?" Karen froze. The confident grin drained from her face in a blink. "You a broken bar, your dad?" she stammered. Ethan walked over to me and gave a subtle nod. "Everything okay?" Before I could reply, Karen cut in. "He's lying. He says he lives here, but he doesn't belong. That truck is an eyesore. You need to have it towed." Ethan glanced at me, then turned back to her. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're standing on my father's property. You are trespassing." Karen turned pale. "A broken bar, I didn't know." But Ethan wasn't finished. He motioned to his deputy. "We'll need to document this." "Ma'am, I'm going to need your full name and ID." Her jaw dropped. "You're reporting me?" Ethan nodded. Yes, ma'am, and we'll also need you to explain how you entered private property without authorization. Karen opened her mouth again, but before she could respond, a call came through the deputy's radio. Possible break-in reported, same location, rear barn entry. Ethan turned to me. Dad, did you report anything else today? I shook my head. Number. The deputy confirmed demotion was detected on a security camera near the stables. Someone other than Karen had been spotted near the horses. Karen's mouth hung open. I didn't bring anyone, she said, panic creeping into her voice. I swear. Ethan's tone shifted instantly, focused and commanding. All right, Paula, stay right here. Deputy, circle around the barn. Mama, broken bar, don't move. Just like that, the situation changed completely. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. Someone else was on my property, someone we didn't know, and I had a feeling this had nothing to do with a simple parking dispute. The moment Ethan told me to stay put, a cold weight settled in my chest. An uninvited person wandering my land? That had never happened before. Karen, arms folded and lips sealed, stood stiff as a board. No longer the biggest problem. Ethan shot me a serious and sharp before jogging toward the barn with his deputy. Now, let me tell you, this ranch isn't some tiny backyard plot. It spans several acres, much of it fenced. That back barn, it's where I keep my best horses and some old equipment. I also installed trail cameras out there last year, mostly to keep an eye out for coyotes and the occasional teenager testing their luck. I watched Ethan and the deputy disappear around the corner. Then, finally, Karen broke the silence. Maybe it's someone trying to break into your shed, she muttered, trying to sound smug. That's what happens when you ignore HOA safety guidelines. I took a slow breath, not bothering to hide my frustration. Ever consider that maybe someone out there came because they were invited by someone stirring up trouble? She said nothing. The silence that followed stretched on. Every second dragged. I could hear the horses getting restless, snorting and kicking inside their stalls. Something was definitely wrong. Then Ethan's radio crackled. Sheriff, we have a visual. One male, white hoodie, mid-20s. He's attempting to cut through the rear fence. My stomach dropped. I took a step forward. The back fence that was right next to the cattle paddock. Karen's expression twitched. Ethan grabbed his radio. Apprehend, but don't engage until I arrive. Then he took off running. I wasn't going to sit around, either. I jumped in my truck and drove around the barn's far side, not to interfere, but I needed to see what was happening on my land. By the time I pulled up, Ethan and the deputy had a young man pinned against the fence. He was zip-tied, red-faced, and muttering nervously. A pair of wire cutters lay on the ground beside him. The back post is damaged, the deputy said, pointing toward the fence. We caught him trying to cut through the southwest corner. The kid couldn't have been more than 25. He didn't look like a hardened criminal, more like someone who'd made a dumb choice. Sweating, eyes darting over his shoulder, like he expected someone to jump out at him. Who sent you? Ethan asked, voice steady. A broken bar. I wasn't stealing anything. The guy stammered. Someone told me the place was empty. Said I could use the fence line trail to sneak out of town. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Who told you that? I don't know her name, he blurted. She had blonde hair, big sunglasses. Said she ran the neighborhood. Every head turned toward Karen. She was near the front gate now, frozen. Slowly, she started backing away like she hadn't heard a word. Ethan marched straight toward her. Ma'am, is what this man just said true? Did you send him onto private land today? Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Answer the question, Ethan said, firm. Yeah, broken bar. I might have mentioned there was an open trail, she replied cautiously. But I didn't tell him to break anything. You knew that trail wasn't public, Ethan replied. You knew it ran along my father's fence, and you still encouraged someone to use it. Karen was visibly sweating now. It was just a suggestion, she muttered. Lots of people use that path. No, ma'am, Ethan said, stepping closer. They used to ask permission. He turned to me. Dad, we'll need to file a formal report. This isn't just trespassing anymore. She knowingly endangered your livestock and your property. Karen's voice rose, desperate now. You're kidding. I am the HOA president. That doesn't mean anything here, Ethan replied sharply. Not on private land. While the deputy escorted the young man into the cruiser, I walked over to check the damage. A whole section of the fence had been pulled away. My cows were about 50 feet off, still grazing, but it could have been a disaster. That's when it all clicked. This wasn't just about rules or appearances. Karen wasn't just nitpicking. She had been spreading lies, telling people they had rights to land that wasn't theirs, pretending the HOA had power where it didn't. She wasn't enforcing order. She was trying to take control of my ranch. I turned to face her. "If you ever step foot on this ranch again without my say-so," I said, my voice low and steady, "I'll make sure the county files every charge possible, starting with criminal trespass." Karen looked stunned. "You can't do that." Ethan stepped beside me. "He absolutely can." Karen's hands trembled. "This is harassment. I'll call the HOA board. I'll get them to petition you." But Ethan didn't blink. "You're not getting warnings anymore," he said coldly. "Next time, I won't be the one answering the call. And the next person won't care that you're just a bored woman with too much time." Karen opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She turned, got into her little golf cart, and drove off ahead down, silent. I stood there, boots dusty, sweat on my brow, and a heart full of more than just anger. What I felt was deeper betrayal, because I had tried. I really had tried to be patient with her. I gave her a smiley broken bar when Karen first moved in. I actually went out of my way to welcome her. I helped pull her dog out of a ditch during the storm. I even built a little birdhouse for her front yard, just trying to be a decent neighbor. And now a broken bar. This. The sun was sinking behind the trees when Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder. "You all right?" I gave him a nod, for now, but we both knew things had changed. This wasn't over, and not by a long shot. Karen's little power trip wasn't winding down, it was gaining momentum, because the very next morning, I found a notice pinned to my front gate. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the county land office. Someone had filed a zoning violation against me. The envelope looked official, stamped with the county seal. Across the top, bold black letters read, "Notice of zoning violation, a response required within 10 business days." I stood on my porch, boots still wet from the morning dew, staring at that piece of paper like it had been written in another language. I hadn't heard a peep from the county in more than a decade, let alone received a violation notice. My ranch had passed every inspection since Reagan was in office, but there was accusations of unauthorized structural changes and improper land use near protected boundaries. It didn't take a genius to guess who was behind it. I called Ethan immediately. "Someone filed a zoning complaint," I told him. "Said I've got unauthorized structures." He sighed on the other end. "I was afraid she might try something like this. Looks like she's getting the county involved now. She's playing a dirty game." I muttered. "I'll see what I can find out," he said. "But if she's using official county channels, you'll have to go through the proper legal process." Those words, "a legal process," made my stomach churn. I hung up and walked out to inspect the land myself. Everything was exactly as it had always been: at the stables, the hay shed, the chicken coop, even the new horse training pen I'd built a couple of years ago with the county inspector's verbal go-ahead was right where it should be. Karen was trying to make my life miserable. Her plan was simple. If she could prove I was breaking zoning laws, she could push for fines, compliance orders, maybe even pressure the HOA into taking a more aggressive stance. They couldn't take my land, but they could sure try to choke it with red tape. That afternoon, I drove down to the county clerk's office. Janet, the woman at the front desk, had known me for years. "Paul, what brings you in?" she asked with a smile. I slid the letter across the counter. "Apparently, my chicken coop is a criminal enterprise now." Her smile dropped as she read the document. "This is nonsense." She typed a few keys on her computer, squinting at the screen. "Well, it was filed anonymously," she said. "But the upload came through the HOA complaint portal. The name linked to the file is a broken bar, Karen Whitmore." I almost laughed. "Isn't that against the rules?" I asked. "Technically, she's allowed to report what she believes is a violation," Janet replied. "But if she's making false claims, that's a different issue entirely. You'll need proof." I rubbed my temples. "This is going to turn into a circus, isn't it?" Janet gave me a reassuring smile. "Maybe, but don't worry, Paul. You're not alone. I'll help you draft a response." That's one thing about small towns, they don't forget the folks who've been around. Still, I knew I had to tread carefully. Karen wasn't just a busybody anymore. She was methodical, calculated. Driving back through her part of the neighborhood, I passed cookie-cutter driveways, identical mailboxes, and plastic flower pots on every porch. I saw her peeking from behind her blinds as my truck rolled by. She knew I'd seen the letter A, and the smug grin on her face said everything. She thought she had me beat. What she didn't know, I wasn't just some aging rancher with a rusted truck. I was a man who had spent a lifetime building this place from the ground up, and no piece of paper or HOA directive was going to scare me off. The next morning, I started digging through files of permits, approvals, time-stamped photos of every building and structure on my land. Ethan even offered to send one of his deputies over to document everything formally. If the county wanted answers, I'd give them answers neatly packaged and sealed tight. But while I was out taking photos of the chicken coop, I heard tires crunching on the gravel drive. I turned, and there she was, Karina, standing at the edge of my gate, arms folded, wearing heels that had no business anywhere near dirt. "You really don't give up, do you?" I said calmly. "I warned you, Paul," she said, smug. "This neighborhood has rules. People come here for order, for peace, not hay bales and rusted trucks." "This isn't your neighborhood," I reminded her. "This is my land." She scoffed. "For now." I raised an eyebrow. "That a threat?" She smiled. "Let's just say a broken bar. I have friends who know how to work the system." I leaned against the fence post and grinned. "Funny, you go on and on about peace and community, but you're the only one causing trouble." Her smile faded. "I've tried being patient," she snapped, "but if you won't cooperate, I'll escalate this until someone forces you to." "Go ahead," I said, stepping forward. "But the next time you show up on my ranch without a reason, I'm filing charges for harassment." "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." She turned, stomping back to her golf cart, the tires spinning up dust behind her. I thought that would be the end of Idle for the day. But I was wrong. Less than 4 hours later, just as I sat down to eat, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet. 2 cruisers rolled up to the edge of my property, lights flashing. I stepped outside. Ethan wasn't in either of them. A broken bar this time. It wasn't Ethan in the cruiser. A young deputy stepped out as someone I'd never seen before. Looked fresh out of the academy, barely old enough to grow a mustache. "Sir," he said, approaching cautiously, "we received a 911 call reporting a disturbance, a broken bar and possible weapons on the property." I blinked. "Weapons? What disturbance?" He glanced at his notepad. "The caller stated that you threatened the HOA president with a firearm." I nearly dropped my fork. "That's a lie," I said firmly. "She was the one who came here uninvited. She was the one making threats." "Sir," he asked, "are you currently carrying any weapons?" I lifted my arms. "Check me." They did. And of course, they found nothing, but the damage had already been done. I was being treated like a threat on my own land. The deputy scribbled a few more notes. "We'll follow up with both parties," he said flatly. "In the meantime, I suggest keeping all interactions civil." "She keeps making false reports," I said, my voice rising. "This is harassment." He didn't respond, just gave a polite nod and left. I stood under the porch light, shaking my head. Karen had pushed things to a new level. Now she was using the legal system to paint me as a danger at turning public records and 911 calls into weapons. This wasn't just a feud anymore. It was something else, and I could feel it building. What I didn't realize was that the next morning would change everything, and not just for me, but for the whole town. Because the next knock on my door didn't come from the police. It came from the county. And it wasn't a warning, it was a court summons. The day began unusually quiet, too quiet. I was nursing my coffee on the porch when I saw the white government SUV crawling up my gravel driveway. Not a cruiser. The side of the vehicle bore the seal of the County Land Use Compliance Office. A man in a gray suit stepped out, clipboard in one hand, sealed envelope in the other. His sunglasses reflected the morning sun. "Morning," he said, calm and professional. I stood up, bracing for the worst. "Let me guess," I said. "You're not here for coffee." "I'm James Carter," he replied, offering a hand. "Senior Zoning Compliance Officer. We've received several complaints regarding unauthorized land use and possible code violations." I didn't shake his hand. "Let me guess," I said again. came from a woman with big sunglasses and too much time on her hands. He gave a restrained smile. We can't reveal the name of the complainant, Sierra Broken Bar, but yes, one of them has been extremely persistent. He handed me the envelope. This is a formal summons. You're required to appear before the county zoning board in 10 days. I opened it, skimming the contents. Right there, bold at the top, notice of hearing a potential code violation, possible injunction pending. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. I wish I were. Carter said, we'll also need to inspect your outbuildings and specifically anything built or altered within the last 5 years. I pointed toward the training pen. That's it, built 2 years ago. County Inspector Ellis gave me verbal approval. Carter nodded as he scribbled notes. Ellis retired last year, and verbal approval isn't traceable. Do you have anything in writing? I clenched my jaw. I'll find it. Good, he said, serious now, because if the board rules against you, they can issue removal orders on any non-permitted structures. They can also temporarily freeze land usage. And just like that, I was boiling. Karen wasn't just trying to make things difficult anymore. She was choking the life out of this ranch one technicality at a time. Carter moved across the property methodically, snapping pictures, measuring the pen, jotting notes. I followed him silently, answering through gritted teeth. Before he left, he handed me his card. I don't take sides, he said plainly. I just enforce the law. But if you have the paperwork, find it fast. As soon as he pulled out of the drive, I went inside and tore the place apart. Filing cabinets, mail bins, desk drawers, and nothing. All I could find was an old yellowing note scribbled with verbal approval at 3:15 p.m. Ellis. Not enough. So I did the only thing I could think of. I drove straight to the county records office, but they had no documentation and nothing listed for the training pen. My stomach dropped. On the way home, I stopped at the local diner, the one where Ellis used to eat every morning. Behind the counter stood Miss Dot, who'd run the place for over 30 years. Paul, she said with a warm smile. Been a while. Dot, I said. You wouldn't happen to know where Ellis moved after retiring? She tapped her chin. Last I heard, he was staying with his daughter in Great Falls. Why? I need to ask him some legal questions. Dot leaned in, her voice low. This got anything to do with that whole mess? I nodded. You be careful, she said. Karen's been poking around City Hall like she owns the place. That made me stop. What do you mean? She was in here last week, Dot explained, asking how to rezone unused land. Wanted to know if she could propose a community expansion into ranch territory. Sounded like she was planning something. And that's when it all became clear. Karen wasn't just annoyed by my presence. She wanted my land, maybe the open space, maybe the water rights, maybe both. She was setting the pieces in place, using every rule, form, and loophole to squeeze me out. I drove home with my thoughts spinning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, flashlight in hand, zoning summons on my lap, and 1,000 memories swirling around me. This ranch wasn't just a piece of land. This land wasn't just wood and soil. It was where I'd taught Ethan to ride his first horse, Broken Bar, where Claire, my late wife, used to plant sunflowers every spring. It was where I'd fixed busted engines, hosted summer cookouts, and lent a hand to neighbors during floods and storms. This wasn't just property, it was my whole life. And now it was under attack. The following morning, Ethan showed up. He looked exhausted, uniform still dusty from a long night shift. You look like you haven't slept, he said, eyeing the half-full mug in my hand. Without a word, I handed him the summons. He scanned it, then cursed under his breath. She really went through with it. She's not pulling punches anymore, I replied. And I still can't find that approval slip. Ethan sat down on the porch steps. You're not fighting this alone, he said. I've already started asking around. You're not the only one she's been targeting. She's been knocking on doors, spinning lies, trying to collect signatures for a so-called expansion project. Expansion? He nodded grimly. She's proposing to rezone everything from her street to your fence line as a shared green space. Basically a community walking trail that just so happens to cut straight through your land. I nearly dropped my coffee. She wants to pave over my pasture. She can't get county approval unless you're found in violation, Ethan explained. That was the missing piece. It had never been about control. Karen wasn't just trying to manage me, she was trying to remove me. She's using the system like a weapon, I muttered. Ethan's expression hardened. Then maybe it's time we use it, too. What do you mean? She submitted false information on government records. That's a crime. If we can prove Ida and get someone on the board to confirm Ida, we could be looking at charges for fraud and perjury. Who's going to help us with that? I asked. Ethan gave a knowing smile. Her vice president, Mrs. Beverly Simmons. She can't stand Karen. I've spoken to her a few times. She's had enough. It was risky, but I nodded. Set up the meeting. That night, a message landed on my phone from an unknown number. Attached was a screenshot of an email from Karen to a man named Greg, someone tied to the zoning board. The subject line read, "Need this pushed through ASAP. The ranch has no paper trail." In the body of the message, "Once the violation sticks, we move to phase 2. I stared at it. Phase 2? Was that code for taking my land? Who sent me the screenshot? I didn't know yet, but I knew this much: Karen wasn't bluffing. She had a plan, and it was already in motion. I stared at that image for a long time, replaying the words in my head. Once the violation sticks, we move to phase 2. This wasn't just shady politics, it was a blueprint, a silent operation with one objective: to get me off my own land. I forwarded the screenshot to Ethan. Within minutes, he called. "Dad," he said, tense. "Where did this come from?" "No idea. It came from an unknown number, but it looks legit." "If it checks out," he said, "this is evidence of malicious intent and collusion with a public official. But we need to verify it's not doctored. If Karen finds out we're building a case, she'll either go silent or get herself a lawyer." "What do we do then?" "We build faster." That evening, Ethan set up a quiet meeting at his place. No uniforms, no official business, just me, him, and Beverly Simmons, Karen's vice president. I didn't know what I expected, but I was surprised when Beverly walked in, late 60s, walking cane in one hand, dressed like she owned the room, and eyes sharp as nails. She didn't shake my hand at first, just looked me up and down. "So," she said, "you're Paul Monroe. I've heard quite a bit." "Let me guess, none of it flattering," I said dryly. She smiled faintly. "Depends who's doing the talking. Karen says you're impossible. Everyone else says you're the reason this town still has a soul." I liked her already. We sat down, and Ethan showed her the email screenshot. She didn't even blink. "That tracks," she said coolly. "Karen's been planning something big for months, whispering in ears, promising property value hikes, offering campaign support to anyone who backs her rezoning efforts." "Why?" I asked. "Why go through all this for a patch of land that isn't hers?" "She doesn't want the ranch," Beverly replied. "She wants what's under it." I raised an eyebrow. "You'll need to explain that." Beverly leaned in, her voice quiet. "Karen used to work for a real estate firm back in Sacramento, the kind that flips neighborhoods and pulls strings at city councils. About a month ago, she told someone that your land might sit above a deep aquifer." "Water?" She nodded. "Developers have been sniffing around. If they can get your land rezoned for residential use and gain control of those water rights, they hit the jackpot." I sank back in my chair, stunned. So this was never about chickens, or fences, or the view from her driveway. It was about control, water, expansion, pure, greedy development wrapped up in HOA red tape. "You got any proof of all that?" I asked quietly. Ethan looked at Beverly. "Do you have proof?" She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small thumb drive. "This contains minutes from private home meetings, emails between Karen and Griga, the same zoning board official from that shady email, and a copy of Karen's proposal to a real estate firm." I was going to hold on to it, but she's gone too far. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said, my voice low. "Don't thank me yet," Beverly replied. "She's already filed for an emergency board review. If that email you got is real, then phase 2 might mean forcing an injunction on your land. And once that happens, she'll push for an eminent domain recommendation." Ethan's eyes widened. "That's only supposed to happen if it serves the public good." "She'll spin it," Beverly said, her tone grim. "Call it a safety concern. Claim you're hostile or that your land is abandoned or misused. With enough paperwork and the right allies on the board, she could make it stick." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'd known Karen was troubly, but these a broken bar. This was something darker. I left Ethan's place that night with a fire in my chest and a resolve like steel in my spine. When I got home, I installed floodlights, motion sensors, and cameras around the ranch. I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. If Karen wanted war, she was going to get Ida every last ounce of it. 2 days later, the zoning board hearing was held in the county courthouse annex, a modest building usually reserved for marriage licenses and tax disputes. But today, the room was packed. Reporters, ranchers, home members. A broken bar in front row center, dressed in a pearl white pantsuit, was Karen. She didn't even look at me, just smirked. The board chair, Cliff Hughes, opened the hearing with a monotone roll call and summary of the issue: zoning discrepancies and potential permit violations on Paul Monroe's property. Karen was called to speak first. She walked up like she was accepting an award. "This isn't personal," she began sweetly. "This is about public safety. Mr. Monroe has structures that pose a collapse risk. His livestock roams dangerously close to community pathways. His land is becoming an eyesore, lowering surrounding property values. The community deserves better." I nearly laughed, but when it was my turn, I skipped the drama. I brought evidence: a box full of photographs, tax filings, repair logs, and letters from neighbors who had lived here decades longer than Karen had even been in the state. Then Ethan stepped forward. "In addition to these documents," he said, holding up Beverly's thumb drive, "we have communication showing a coordinated effort to defame and displace Mr. Monroe using knowingly false claims." There was a noticeable shift in the room. Even Cliff Hughes arched an eyebrow. Karen's smile faded. Then Beverly took the floor. "I am the HOA vice president," she said confidently, "and I'm submitting these records as proof that this board is being manipulated for personal gain." Karen jumped to her feet. "She's lying." Cliff raised a hand. "Miss Whitmore, please remain seated." "You don't understand," Karen shouted, but Cliff cut her off again. "This board will evaluate the facts. And as of now, your credibility is under serious review." Karen slumped back into her seat, her face pale and drawn. Then Ethan delivered the final blow. "We traced the email submitted anonymously to the zoning office," he said. "It was sent from a device registered to Ms. Whitmore's whole login credentials. She filed a false complaint using an alias." Gasps echoed through the room. Karen went white. The board called for a recess. I stepped outside into the afternoon sun, my heart thudding in my chest. Ethan joined me. "You all right?" he asked. "Getting there." But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "What is it?" I asked. "There's been a fire." My stomach dropped. "Where?" He hesitated. "Your barn. It's burning." I didn't wait to speak. I just ran. Thick black smoke rose over the treetops like a flare. My legs burned as I sprinted, dread coiling in my gut. By the time I reached the ranch, the fire was fully visible from the road. Flames devoured the back barn of the same one Karen had complained about. The same one where I kept my feed, my Tulsa broken bar and my late wife's old saddle. My chest felt like it would burst. Fire trucks were already there, hoses aimed at the collapsing roof. "Whoever did this," I muttered, breathless. "They didn't just want to scare me, they wanted to erase me." As we watched the flames shrink to embers, a young volunteer firefighter approached, maybe 19. Dust streaked his face, eyes wide with concern. "Mr. Monroe?" he said. "We found this near the side of the barn." He handed me a partially burned flyer, edges blackened, center still legible. It read, "Proposed development site, a future home of Cedar Trails Community Walking Park." At the bottom, in clean, official font, "Project Liaison, Karen Whitmore." Ethan took one look and exhaled sharply. "That's her signature." "She's moving to phase 2, I whispered. "And she's torching everything in her path." We spent hours with investigators. They documented everything of the burn pattern, the remnants of the flyer, an empty gas can half melted near the barn wall, no clear fingerprints, no usable camera footage. And yet we both knew who did this. The problem was a broken bar. Knowing wasn't the same as proving. The next day, the fire report hit the local news. "Blaze erupts at Monroe Ranch, a cause under investigation." That headline hit the local paper by morning and the whole town took notice. People who had never given me the time of day were suddenly dropping by, arms full of pies, blankets, even hay bales. Joe Timmons, a neighboring farmer, pressed a folded $100 bill into my hand. For repairs, brother, he said gruffly. You stood up for all of us. But not everyone was on my side. Karen had gone radio silent in no home meetings, no social media rants, not even her usual patrols. That silence only made me more uneasy. That afternoon, Beverly called. I think you need to see something, she said. We met behind the local library, a neutral spot. She handed me a manila folder. Inside, blueprints, development plans, county approval stamps included. Where did you get these? I asked, flipping through the pages. She submitted them last week, Beverly replied, before the board hearing. She thought it was a done deal. My jaw clenched. She never planned to stop that fiery broken bar. It wasn't just intimidation, Beverly said. It was her way of erasing the past to make room for her future. Then we expose it, I said, voice steady. We take it to the press, the sheriff, the state if we have to. Beverly nodded. I've got friends on the county council. They won't like what they're about to find out. That night, Ethan and I sat on the porch again, watching the smoke from the barn drift like ghosts in the moonlight. I know this hurts, he said softly. It's not just the barn, I replied. It's about Claire's saddle. She kept it there, said it reminded her of her father. Now a broken bar, it's just ash. Ethan looked down. She'd be proud of you for standing your ground. We sat in silence until a sleek black SUV rolled up our driveway. No license plate. It stopped near the gate. The window lowered. Karen, she didn't say a word, just sat there, watching, her sunglasses catching the porch light like cold glass. A warning. Then she drove off as slowly as she arrived. She's not done, I muttered. No, Ethan said grimly. She's getting desperate. He was right. The next morning, a letter from the sheriff's office arrived. Karen had filed a restraining order against me claiming I'd threatened her, spied on her home, and caused emotional distress. Because she filed first, I was temporarily banned from coming within 100 feet of her property, including the HOA's community center, where the final zoning decision would be held in 3 days. She hadn't just played dirty, she was trying to erase me from the very room where everything would be decided. But Karen had forgotten something important. I wasn't the only one who knew how to fight, because the person scheduled to open that final zoning hearing a broken bar was my son. The morning of the hearing arrived like a thunderstorm, charged, loud, and impossible to ignore. The courthouse annex was packed wall to wall, reporters shoulder to shoulder with ranchers. Neighbors filled every seat. People wanted answers. Would Karen win? Would she finally take control of Monroe Ranch and pave over it with walking rails and political ambition? I should have been in that room, but because of the restraining order, I was forced to stay 100 feet away from any home-managed facility. And since the annex had once accepted funding from HOA-sponsored public improvement funds, it technically qualified. A brilliant, underhanded move. She knew I wouldn't break the law. But the truth was still in the room. Because Ethan Monroe, sheriff, son, and defender of our family's land, was sitting front and center with a thick black binder marked, Property Defense, Monroe Ranch, a chain of ownership, permits, and fraudulent tax. And seated beside him like a steel post in a windstorm was Beverly Simmons, a HOA vice president and unexpected ally. Karen strutted into the chamber like royalty entering her throne room. Pearl white dress, oversized sunglasses, and a pink binder labeled, HOA petition to redesign ranch property for community benefit. The board chair, Cliff Hughes, called the hearing to order. Today we are gathered to determine the final ruling on zoning and land use pertaining to Monroe Ranch, based on submitted reports from the Homeowners Association and counterclaims filed by county officials. Karen was called up first. She launched into her speech with polished confidence. The community has spoken, she began. They're tired of waking up to livestock noise, of smelling hay from their front porches. This land is underutilized. The proposed development will raise property values, add walking paths, and create shared space for families. She smiled, proud as a peacock, and then added a broken bar. Mr. Monroe has refused to cooperate with the HOA, Karen declared, her voice syrupy with self-righteousness, and has repeatedly antagonized members, myself included. Cliff Hughes nodded, jotting down a note, then looked up. Sheriff Monroe, you may proceed. Ethan stood, He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He simply told the truth. My name is Sheriff Ethan Monroe. I was born and raised on Monroe Ranch. I've served this county for over 15 years. I've responded to every emergency, every dispute, every act of goodwill, a broken bar, and every act of malice. What's happening here today isn't about zoning, it's about a vendetta, dressed up as civic duty. Karen's jaw clenched, her lips a hard line. Ethan continued, holding up a binder. Inside, you'll find signed documentation confirming the ranch's historical zoning exemption, approved building permits, and a written note from the former county inspector acknowledging verbal approval of recent expansions. But there's more. He flipped the binder open. We have security footage, sworn statements from neighbors, and now, an active investigation into a criminal act tied directly to this dispute. He held up a printed screenshot. This email sent by Miss Karen Whitmore to a zoning board official outlines a plan to proceed with development regardless of this board's ruling. She refers to this scheme as a Phase 2, which is a clear breach of state zoning ethics codes. He turned another page. Additionally, the early report from the arson investigation indicates the use of an accelerant at the Monroe barn fire. While no formal suspect has been named yet, the evidence strongly supports that this was an intentional act by someone with motive. Karen bolted to her feet, face crimson. Objection. He's not an attorney. Cliff raised his hand calmly. Miss Whitmore, please sit down. But she didn't. This is slander. Lies. He's only defending his father. Then Beverly stood. Then maybe you'll listen to me. She faced the board, voice strong and clear. As vice president of the HOA, I hereby submit a motion of no confidence in Karen Whitmore. Additionally, I present evidence that she submitted development plans without board approval, and falsely did so under the HOA's name. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen turned ghost white. You can't do that, a broken bar, she whispered. Oh, but I just did, Beverly replied, handing the documents to the clerk. The unraveling began. Karen shouted incoherently, a desperate, flailing, I was doing this for all of you, for your homes, for your kids. That ranch is a pile of dirt and hay and chickens. It's trash. No one listened. Security officers entered and escorted her out as she screamed about lawsuits and reparations. The room quieted. Cliff Hughes tapped the gavel. This board finds no evidence of zoning violations. All complaints against Mr. Monroe are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, we recommend that Miss Whitmore be investigated for ethics violations and potential criminal misrepresentation. The room erupted in cheers. I wasn't inside, but I saw it all live on a shaky phone stream Beverly had hidden beneath the table. When the final ruling came down, I laughed out loud and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. I was free. 2 days later, Karen was formally removed as HOA president. Her name and face were plastered all over the local news. HOA president ousted after zoning scandal, arson allegations. She left town quietly, packed up in the dark, and didn't say goodbye to a soul. The restraining order dropped, the case closed, and the ranch still standing. Ethan helped me rebuild the barn. Neighbors pitched in. Kids from town painted wooden signs that read, Monroe Ranch Forever, and in the center of the rebuilt barn, I placed a new saddle. It wasn't Claire's, but it stood for her. A symbol of love, legacy, and land is something no amount of money or power could take away. One warm Saturday morning, Ethan and I stood by the pasture, coffee mugs in hand. You ever think of retiring? He asked, watching the breeze roll through the grass. I looked out across the fields, green, open, free. Not yet, I said. Someone's got to keep the vultures off this land. He smiled. You're not alone, Dad. Nope, I said, resting my arm across his shoulder. I've got a sheriff for a son. And together, we turned back toward the barn, home again. Safe, strong, exactly as it was always meant to be.